Hi everyone, and welcome to the Friday, March 4th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson, our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, well, Crimea and Ukraine and Russia and everything going on right now. It's taken over the news completely. I mean, you turn on any cable news program, it's 24 hours a day, and understandably. I mean, we have a guy in Russia who, in Putin, who's talking nuclear now, and that's actually in their battle strategy, and in their long-term battles, it's always been there. So then things are getting worse.
Yeah, they're getting worse for the Ukrainian people. They're getting worse for the tensions globally because you're right, Putin is such a wild card.
Yes.
And I think people are starting to realize, if they hadn't before, that really the only language Putin speaks is money.
Yes.
And so we're starting to see, even here in Silicon Valley, you're starting to see these tech companies vote with their dollars and their storefronts and, their in the rentals, if you're here, Airbnb,
Yeah.
to try to say, hey, we're really trying to put some economic pressure on Putin and on Russia. At the same time, there's this feeling that Russians themselves aren't really behind this attack.
No, and in fact, there are stories that graffiti is showing up everywhere in Russia, especially Moscow and St. Petersburg. The government, takes it all down, and then it goes up the next night, which is no more war.
Right.
I mean, this is sort of, now we're starting to see that the Irish democracy, which is kind of refusing to participate, not go along. I mean, I just read something today that pointed out the fact that most of the people in Russia have never known life in the Soviet Union.
Right.
And so the idea of restoring the old Soviet Empire and all that doesn't have quite the buzz for them that it does for the old commissars running the country.
No, the young people, I was there not too long ago in St. Petersburg and Moscow. All the young people dress nice, they have iPhones. They're not longing for the USSR. They want to get venture capital funding. They want to be well educated.
Start their own companies, yeah.
And so, granted, there's a lot of risk. I mean, when I was in a bar or a restaurant, the name Putin was whispered, and this was recent history. I mean, this is just not long ago.
Yeah.
Putin was even whispered by Russians. They just don't want people to think you're talking about him. That's the fear and the sort of intimidation he has over people. So I'm super impressed to see.
He and his generals are in the bunker right now. They don't seem to actually be actively involved in Russian life right now. That they're in that bubble where they're only talking to each other. And even photos that have leaked out from there, the generals don't look real happy. They're looking at each other like, what are we going to do about this guy?
Well, we've seen lots of devastation to Ukraine, and we've seen the world react, but boy, he's lost the PR war 10 times over already.
Oh, yeah, well, that myth, I only want Crimea. Well, I got that, and, 10 years later, I only want eastern Ukraine, because that's where the Russians are. Well, that's out the window now. It's obvious he wants the whole country. And now some of his advisors are talking about the Baltics, I mean, how far does this really go? All the way back to the high water mark of the Soviet Union? Is that his ambition? If that's the case, we have a real problem.
Right, and you're starting to see here, to bring this to local and to tech, you're seeing a lot of companies trying to say, hey, we're going to pull out, we're going to not allow them to monetize our sites, whether it's YouTube or Google or, Facebook, Twitter. They're all saying that, and I don't know the effect on a super, super rich billionaire like Vladimir Putin. But again, a lot of this is the PR war. A lot of this is aimed, I think, directly at young Russians who say, wait a minute, we like these products, we like these companies.
If I was a 25-year-old Russian professional living in St. Petersburg and I look and I see the Apple store is closed, I can't get all the technology, products that I want. I can't get on the web. I can't buy software. I can't even go to the ATM. Meanwhile, I've had some stock invested in tech companies, But now, the Russian stock market is shut down, and before it shut down, it lost, half of its value. I got to be asking, what does my future look like right now?
Right. What is in it for me, this battle, if I'm
Yeah.
a young Russian person who really has more than one foot into the, I don't know if I want to say democratic, but the open tech world
Right.
as opposed to the old Soviet Union. There's really nothing there for them. And that's, I think, the pressure that these companies are putting on. I mean, for goodness sakes, if you're Russian, you're looking, they have Teslas there. You're looking at SpaceX, and to find out that the leader of those companies is giving satellites to the Ukraine so that they can stay on board to do something you already do, which is to get on YouTube and to get on Twitter.
Right.
It's got to be just humiliating.
And looking at the prospect that if this keeps going, you become a pariah in the world the rest of your life. That everyone's going to look at you it's like you're a former Nazi. I mean, this is a position I would expect even greater backlash in the ex-Soviet Union now in Russia. That the kids of the whose parents were Khrushchev era are now going to be looking at this and going, what the hell is going on here? What do I do now?
Right.
And there's been some suggestion that this is similar to the 30s in Germany, where you have the intellectual brain drain.
I mean, there may be. We haven't seen that yet. It's too young. And again,
Yeah, well, I saw a piece by Vivek Wada, and he said, let's start accepting these people.
sure.
Anyone that can get out. Welcome to the United States. I mean, we know the effect that the intellectuals, especially the Jewish intellectuals that got out of Germany in the 30s, transformed American life. They had a profound effect on the 50s and the transformation of America into, a great, not just military power and economic power, but social and artistic power. And it seems like, if Putin thinks that all these young programmers are the future that going to get him out of all this, I think he's dreaming. He may be losing half of his intellectual capital in that country in the next year or two.
I agree.
Okay, so we have Apple's out of Russia, Oracle's out of Russia, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube are limiting what their Russian accounts can say and post. I mean, this is a very interesting new kind of warfare.
Well, and it's like what we said earlier in the show.
Oh, I forgot. Elon Musk sent terminals to Starlink so that Ukraine can stay on the internet. I mean, it's interesting. He has a new technology that's almost undefeatable for keeping communication lines open. Usually, that's the heart of warfare,
Right.
is interrupting your other side's communications.
And in recent skirmishes, we've seen the social media platforms being used to get word out when tyrannical governments shut down the usual ways to get out. So now, by trying to shut down the internet, that's sort of, okay, well, in the modern warfare, if you don't want your people to communicate, that's what you have to do. Musk stepping in with Starlink terminals and apparently they're up as of, there was a SpaceX launch on Thursday, and during that launch, it was reported that the Starlink terminals in Ukraine were up and running. So perhaps they still have some internet. But again, as we said earlier, I think this reaction from the companies is aimed both at helping Ukraine, but at showing the young people of Russia, hey, you're not in the right here. You're not on the right side of history. And we, the companies, are standing for open communication and not
providing
tyranny.
them with another source of information
Absolutely.
besides the official government propaganda.
Right, I expect, it's been companies by the day. Late last night, Airbnb said we're no longer operating in Russia. There's pressure on, Starbucks, on McDonald's. If you go on social media, people are like, hey, why are you guys still open in Russia?
Yeah.
Do the right thing, get on the right side of history. And it's just interesting to see how each day brings more companies doing different things.
Now, I read one caveat, though, regarding Starlink and some of these other systems, is that they enable the other side to trace your location.
Well, if you're on the internet and you're on a phone, you're traceable. So there's that. And we've seen the warnings like, hey, don't give away any positioning.
Right.
People know Ukrainians are in Ukraine. I don't.
Sure.
I think the
actual
idea.
precise location of military units.
Right, and they're really trying to not give that away. And period. My guess is you're not on an open iPhone if you're near a military installation anyway. So I don't know that that would apply there. I think this is to give the average individual a chance to, and journalist a chance to get the word out.
Yeah, this is a very interesting test bed. We've always talked about the new era of warfare and cyber war and use of technology and social networks. We're seeing it in action in real time being created in front of us right now.
Absolutely. And it's just such a different, not only look when it comes to the battleground, but a different look in how things are communicated.
Okay, so also this week we had President Biden gave his first official State of the Union address in person. Did you hear anything in there that related to Silicon Valley? Besides a celebration of Intel's new fab in Ohio.
Yeah, and I think he was sticking so closely to the economy. Because everyone's freaking out, understandably, about inflation. And to say, hey, we still have companies that are spending tens of billions of dollars. He threw out $100 billion figure when he talked about Pat Gelsinger, who was, by the way, at the State of the Union. Yeah. So I think that was sort of the nod to technology for the most part. Remember, President Obama had brought up social media and some of its concerns at State of the Unions. Obviously, Trump was very much tied into social media. I think Biden, if Biden tried to talk about the power of TikTok, it would have looked awkward.
Yeah.
I think he stuck to stuck to who brought him, which are the big chip companies that are going to spend tens of billions of dollars in America. And remember, chip fabs, they've been overseas for a long time, right? It's pretty impressive, the idea that some of this may be built here.
Well, we talk about Gelsinger trying to turn things around and give a new lease of life to Intel and all that. He got $10 million of publicity.
Oh, yeah.
The camera was actually on him. And it's irony, 50 years after chips were the center of everything, finally they get recognized at a State of the Union address.
Yeah. And I thought that President Biden talked a lot about green energy, and that was good. Not that Elon Musk needs any more publicity, but it is a little baffling that every time Biden, and this is numerous times now, every time President Biden talks about EVs and green energy, he leaves out Tesla.
Right.
And again, we don't need to throw more flowers at Elon Musk, but my goodness, they are the leader in that category, and they're American.
As Elon himself noted in a Twitter, he's actually bigger than Ford and GM's EV operations combined.
Well, sure. I mean, he
says it's because we're not unionized, so that's why we don't get mentioned by the president. So he trolled the president by saying, "Okay, we'll invite the UAW in to try to organize us."
Yeah, I mean, I don't quite understand how Musk can have it both ways with Tesla.
Yeah.
Hey, we're a tech company. Hey, we're an auto plant. Right. Hey, we've got stock options for some people. You guys can't unionize, and you probably don't have stock options, and we're going to treat you bad, and there are literally lawsuits because of the way you've been treated. He's really trying to have it both ways. He doesn't have to do that. In the same way that Amazon can pay their warehouse workers more, Elon Musk can take care of those people on the line. He can certainly afford to do that.
But he's essentially saying, I'll literally invite in unions to try to organize, betting that my people will not want to be part of a union.
I don't know what his incentives are, but we don't see, I don't think, those auto workers with high salaries and stock options and all the stuff that you get if you work at Tesla headquarters. Why not?
Why not?
That would be a good way to keep the union out, but I don't know that they have those benefits.
I don't either, but he's certainly bold. I mean, you got to give this guy credit. At some point, he has to fall. We've never seen, when we see characters like this, these crazy, wild, take extreme chances, take on, sacred cows. Eventually, the forces begin to marshal together to defeat them.
Right, and you don't know how much of both sides we need to see. Yeah. Musk can help save those kids, from that cave, but he tarnishes it by calling the person a derogatory name.
Yeah.
Why would he do that? He's sending communication, a lifeline to Ukraine. Well, why do you then have to have your company sued for racist taunts in your factory? Why can't you just have the good without the bad? But maybe with Elon Musk, You can't.
I don't think you can separate the two. I
Apparently
also
not.
think he's an adrenaline junkie.
There's that
He
too.
likes this. It spurs him on to other things.
Yeah.
Okay, there's so many things to talk about. I read a very interesting piece by a woman named Debby in Bloomberg Technology, where she argues that if Putin is depending upon China's tech industry to get him through, China's likely not to help out because, interestingly enough, the even higher on the food pyramid, on the pyramid of the valley, is semiconductor equipment. The one we always forget, the tail of the dog, the last into a boom and the first out. The applied materials of the world. That they're still here. That you can't make chips without those guys. We forget that. China can't forget that. And so if Putin says, well, we'll just buy your technology, and the United States says, well, in that case, we're not going to, sell any of our, wafer processing devices to China, China's going to abandon Putin too.
Well, we'll see. One of the things about why this is so interestingly a technology focused war is because, as we've said, the earth is flat. We're all interrelated, especially economically.
Yeah.
And that goes for the products we make, and therefore the politics are all intertwined that way. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. But obviously, the best case scenario is it just ends because there are still lives at stake and
Yes.
nuclear power plants, and this is just completely out of control. But yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of, will Russia turn to crypto? Will more companies cut back? There are all these questions that ultimately only mean anything if Putin continues to aggressively invade Ukraine.
Okay, now you sent me the argument that if Russia turns to crypto, it may not benefit as much as people think it might.
Well, they may
there's
not.
a way around bank sanctions. But interestingly, the Ukraine may be benefiting more from crypto than Russia.
In 1 week, there's been a fundraiser where some of the crypto and Ethereum, and Bitcoin
Yeah.
holders were like, hey, let's raise some money. They raised like $60 million. And I know that's not a fortune, but it's pretty impressive that fast.
That fast, yeah.
Pretty much an online social media fundraiser of crypto to go to Ukraine and its people. Whereas Russia has, some tough go. Their banks are being, sanctioned. The ruble is devalued. You need money to make money. So I don't know that crypto is the
And
be all
you're
end all for
spending
Russia.
$10 billion a day attacking another country.
Right. So they can say, oh, Russia might just turn to crypto, but some of these crypto companies won't do business with them. And even those that do are going to say, show me the rubles.
Yeah, well, and as an aside, those plutocrats whose yachts and everything else were attaching, they'd be the first one to go into crypto, but that may not be their safe harbor either. I mean, the plutocrats of Russia may be in a box right now, and they're
Right.
going to be looking for how you get out of that box.
Just like we talked about the young people, what do those guys have to gain from this war?
Nothing.
They're losing their yachts, they're losing their status, and I imagine with the
Fulfilling an
ruble.
old KGB colonel's dream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do they have to gain from this? I would say very little, if anything. So at some point, do they turn on Putin too?
Yes. Well, let's hope so. Okay, quick turn. Let's go into business for a moment.
All right.
Because things are happening in the gestalt of American business and tech right now that I don't think anybody's noticing. But for example, Twitter just announced to their employees, you never have to come back to the office. They've gone full virtual.
And yet at the same time, they're saying you can, and here's the date when you can. Google is doing something similar. Apple just announced the same thing, but I think what they want is to show that they're open. They like to get people back to work, but they're also sort of towing this line of,
Yeah.
hey, how progressive can we be?
So pseudo open.
Well, they're worried. Look,
Yeah, you can work at home, but if you miss the 11 o'clock meeting today at headquarters, well, we're going to notice that.
We've talked about how the power has shifted to the employee.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these big companies are worried if they tell you, Michael, you have to come back to the office 9 to 5 now,
Right.
get in your car and drive, shave, all that stuff, that person is going to say, ooh, it's still an employee market. And these startups are more nimble.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, work wherever you want. I'll go over there. And I think that's the concern of these big companies. They want people back, But at the same time, they're worried about losing them
Yeah.
to the startups who say, nah, you can stay home.
So it's not official pressure. It's kind of sub rosa social pressure. Yeah.
Until
Yeah,
there's
we
going
miss
to
you
be.
at the lunch today, the beer bust, you know.
Right. I mean, I've talked to executives and I've talked even to tech workers. They say there is something to be said for being present,
Sure.
for being together.
For swapping pheromones.
Yeah, whatever. But I mean, there's something to be said, right, for being in the office, and that's going to be weighed against the fact that all these people have still kept their jobs. The stock prices have done pretty well.
They didn't lose any productivity.
Exactly, and maybe they liked being at home. Now, some people are probably scratching at the door, get me
Oh,
back to the office.
I have neighbors, some of them are like, I'm never going back to the office.
But
And
others are
other
saying
ones
the same
go,
thing, right?
my kids have made me insane. I can't wait to get back in a car and start driving away every morning.
Right. I mean, I have a teenager who does some nannying on the side,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, the adults are starting to call again. Hey, we need you. Can you do this? Can you do that? Because I think they're going back either to work or going out on, dates, just going out again, being
Yeah.
social. And I think companies want to take advantage of that, as you call it, the gestalt of leaving home again. But it comes with a risk because some people, like you said, may not want to get back.
Okay, another story that isn't making any headlines, but I think it's momentous because a few years ago, Amazon said we're going to open brick and mortar stores. And everyone thought, here it is. Amazon's going to take everything. They're going to sweep the table. Walmart was shaking in its boots, and now all of a sudden Amazon, oh, by the way, we're not going to do that store thing anymore.
I think this whole thing is overrated. I think Amazon getting into the brick and mortar thing was overrated. I went to those stores and it was like being in a bookstore, which I love bookstores,
Yeah.
but I realize a lot of people are shopping online. And everything I found in an Amazon store, and I realize this is an obvious statement, can be found online.
Yeah.
So what's the point? You're either going to be part of that sort of
Sure.
world or not. I say keep the independent bookstores, keep the independent coffee shops open, but Amazon doesn't do the physical world any better than anybody else.
No, and they've made their real move in the physical world with all of those trucks.
Right.
I mean, why do you need to have a store 4 miles away and with a parking lot and lines and all that when there's a guy coming to your house
Right,
and
and
he's walking up your driveway and he puts the stuff on your front porch?
Right. Amazon is a very arrogant company, and it's earned that arrogance, I realize, because it's gigantic, but it can't out brick and mortar the people that have been doing it for a long time. I mean, the Whole Foods experience.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest Whole Foods guy, but is it any different than it was before Amazon took over?
No.
I mean, in a better way?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that Amazon can out grocery store the grocery store people
I think
or
their
out bookstore.
inventories are slightly smaller and their prices may be a little higher.
See, I wouldn't
You
call
know.
that a benefit.
No, it's not. Benefit for Amazon.
Well, right, but can they make the experience of a brick and mortar store better? I say no.
Yeah, no, I mean that is a phenomena that has been evolving over the last 100 years.
Right.
Basically every scenario has been tried once, and they've settled on what they think is the best model right now.
Right.
And I don't think Amazon can bring anything to the party. Okay, the next Apple event. These things seem so minor in the face of the news right now, but
Right.
the next big Apple gathering is March 8th, next Tuesday.
Yeah, so as you're listening to this, there may be one right around the corner, or you may have already had one. And then the next time you and I talk, we'll
Yeah.
talk about it. But, it's going to be full of, I'm sure.
By the way, you make a good point. I have found that some listeners to this program actually binge listen
Wow.
because they're so busy they'll go 2 or 3 weeks and then they'll just gangbang 3 shows all at once.
Is that what you podcasters call it these days?
Yeah.
So with the Apple thing.
What do you think? Is there anything interesting coming out?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
there's going to be a new Mac, right?
likely a new Mac. I think, the rumors are that Apple may go cheap, which is, to keep the SE line going, which I'm a really big fan of as
Yeah.
someone who got their, pre-teens phones and you knew they were going to get lost and damaged.
Yeah.
The SE has been a fantastic lineup,
Right.
addition to that lineup.
And a revamped iPad.
Yeah, I think there'll be those kind of moves. I don't know that we'll get a big home run. I mean, the economy is good. Apple is doing, still great, but we are in inflationary times. Right now, is it really a good time to say, here's a brand new something or other? I just don't know.
Well, and as you and I have talked about, I'm not sure Apple's capable of hitting home runs anymore. Maybe doubles and occasional triples.
We may
But the
see
home
more.
run, I think, belongs to the Jobs era.
It's true, but they've got to fix that. And maybe what they're going to try to do is, and they can't just talk about new services. That's not sexy enough. I think we may see some more AR, VR kind of things. No one's really done that well yet.
No one seems that excited. I keep hearing about virtual reality, and we're just around the corner. I think it's one of these things that is just around the corner. That's never around the corner until one day it's in front of our faces or attached to our faces.
Yeah, I mean it's just not ready for prime time yet. And for Apple to do this in a virtual event, the Apple way would be, okay, look under your seat.
Yeah.
There's glasses, and the whole thing is in VR or AR, and it's just a blow your socks off kind of experience. Obviously, you can't do that if you're.
Right, and I don't know if Apple can still do that, and it would probably lead to a lot of deaths, a scramble. I mean, I was there when Jobs said, "Oh, by the way, there's a DVD under your chair," in front of whatever it was, 3,000 people.
Right.
And the chairs were crashing and falling and everything else.
Well, I've
just
been
to
to many
get a
of those
copy
too.
of Independence Day.
I don't think we had any deaths, but I see what you mean. Yeah. Right, and that's the more in-person experience that maybe we're waiting for. So once again, it's going to be online. You're absolutely right. As someone who covers these 100% of the time, they've lost something, which is inevitable. But hopefully they'll at least hint about coming back live with these things, because now they're starting to bring workers back. So maybe they can bring us back too.
I also think it's a personality thing. Cook is not an extravaganza kind of guy.
Right.
As opposed to Steve. Okay, next one. This one. I'm getting real tired of Valley oligarchs getting involved in politics. Now, Wisconsin has declared that Mark Zuckerberg's, major investments, those Zuckerbucks they call them, in the last election, has now been declared bribery. Do we need these guys? Well, two things. First of all, do we need these guys interfering, using their money to interfere this deeply in the operation of American life and government?
Well, but I mean, take away tech executives and just say really, really wealthy people. Do we need that?
Yeah, tech executives, we didn't see them in the past doing this.
Right.
We've always had, industrialists doing this kind of stuff. But there was always this notion that tech stood apart from all that it didn't get its hands messy with, politics. You go back to even Noyce. He really didn't want to go back to D.C. to fight for Silicon Valley against Japan, but he did it. Now these guys are just in with both feet. They're throwing around huge amounts of money. And I'm beginning to think that Mark Zuckerberg may be the most reviled person in Silicon Valley history because of the stuff that's been going on for the last few years, the recent, information about the effect upon young girls, on and on and on. And this seems to cement it even more. That was he buying elections in certain states? He's certainly been accused of it now.
That's always the concern when there's dark money. And,
yes.
With Zuckerberg, it's not only the real where is his money going, but there's always 1,000 conspiracy theories swirling around that guy. And he can't get out of his way. He almost took a step back to say, I'm not going to sort of do the day-to-day Facebook stuff. Ooh, this is maybe interesting. Is he turning over the reins?
Right.
Not really.
Not really.
But, we've seen in the past say Scott McNeely's or whoever occasionally step back and say, I just want to tinker with the tech.
Yeah.
Even Bill Gates did that.
Even Gates did that.
Right. We're kind of waiting to see Zuckerberg do that because everything that he does comes with that taint of misinformation and politics and conspiracy theories, many of which, heck, most of which he doesn't deserve, but they just follow someone of that magnitude anyway.
And he's so unreadable.
Right.
His personality and all of that. He's not a blowhard. He's scarier than that.
Right. I mean, his shyness is not not a positive addition to the whole equation.
But I can't think of anybody that's been in that situation, the shifting attitude of the valley towards them and the world since Shockley. I mean, it's kind of interesting. No one's come out and said it, but is he the villain of the Silicon Valley story?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah, I think he
pretty
is.
easy to say, and that's saying something. We've had Travis Kalanick, we have Elon Musk,
Yeah.
and yet Zuckerberg can say, hey, we've done some great things. We have a hospital, we have, and that's good. But he's reviled, and I don't know how you get around that.
I don't either. Okay, finally, a classic example of double talk. Samsung. Uh, they they have created an app called Game Optimism Service, and that's supposed to make your phone much more efficient at playing games. Okay, what they don't mention is that it literally throttles down the performance of 10,000 popular other applications, non-game applications. So this optimization service actually slows down your Instagram, TikTok, Netflix, Microsoft Office, Google Keep, Spotify, Snapchat, YouTube Music, and more. And it even throttles down Samsung's own apps, like Pay, Secure Folder, and Bixby. I mean, I did a little advertising in my time, and I did a little PR. But how do you have the nerve to call this an optimization service? And
That's
then do
1984
this on
doublespeak,
everything else?
Right. Throttling is always dangerous. Netflix learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Comcast, the company that I work for, all these companies that have been even accused of slowing things down. It's like, hey, wait a minute, we didn't get to the modern era
Right.
to slow things down. We
Yeah.
want things super fast.
Yeah, we want that 60-mile-an-hour Bugatti.
Yeah, I'm guessing game optimization service goes away pretty quick.
Yeah. I mean, how did they think they were going to get away with this?
I don't know, but it will go away faster than one of those optimized Samsung games.
Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.